welcome to Func Prog Sweden, everyone. A warm welcome to Func Prog Sweden. If this is your first Func Prog Sweden, then warm welcome. If this is not your first Func Prog Sweden, then welcome back. Thank you very much. Func Prog Sweden is the meetup where we explore functional programming and functional programming concepts. And today, let's head over to today's agenda and we'll see what we have today. First up, short intro by me, Magnus Sedlacek. Then we'll head over to Elixir in the Enterprise, Lessons from Maersk by Erik, Mejer, Hansen. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a topic how they introduced Elixir into big enterprise. Then we'll have Electric plus Rama, a closure stack from the future, ? By Felix Alm. Then in the end, if you have more questions, please join the post-show chat where you can ask more elaborate questions if you didn't get an answer in the beginning from the presenters. And now, we would first up like to thank tonight's video sponsor, Adabeat. Adabeat is a consultancy company with office in Stockholm and in Ho Chi Minh City. And they are working exclusively with different FP languages. If you want to know more about Adabeat, head over to adabeat.com or check them out on social media. And of course, we also want to push our own conference that we're going to have in a little bit, and I would like to say a month, but it's less than a month, October 15th. Head over to funcprogconf.se and or .com to check out. It's going to be a magnificent lineup. And it's going to be a fun day. That event will not be live streamed. So if you're in Stockholm, make sure to buy a ticket and come over. Then if we look at the schedule ahead then. So I already mentioned 15th of October, FuncProConf. Then 11th of November, we are at Kivra. So also if you're in Stockholm, make sure to sign up and come to Kivra. And then in December, we haven't decided yet on what and when, but we'll come back with that. So, of course, you want to support the meetup group Func Prog Sweden, and you want to support functional programming, then you should head over to Meetup and to YouTube and follow us and subscribe and etc. And also head into the Discord server where you can follow and discuss functional programming with more people and also discuss tonight's live stream. And if you have questions during the presentation online, please use the chat in YouTube and Discord to ask them. And with that, let's get started. First guest and presenter, warm welcome, Erik Mejer. Hey, Erik, welcome to Func Prog Sweden.
Thank you.
You are warm welcome, Erik.
All right. So, hey, as already noted, I'm Erik. And I am a senior engineering manager at Maersk. And I've been excited about Elixir since around 2015, but I never quite imagined that I'd bring it into a company like Maersk. Yet, here we are, using it to help one of the biggest challenges of our time, decarbonation. When the energy transition platform, which is I'm part of, kicked off, we had to move fast. But in a company like Maersk, speed alone isn't enough. You need to entrust by working with security, architecture, hiring, and tooling from the beginning. Today, I'll share why Elixir made sense for us, what surprised us, and what it took to introduce it in a way that let us innovate like we tended to stay. Startups move fast, enterprises tend to move more carefully. So what if you need both? My personal journey with Elixir started back in 2015 when I picked up Dave Thomas's Program in Elixir book. At the time, I was working at a small startup called Open Telehealth. We were building systems to monitor people with chronic illnesses. We were a four-person development team, and honestly, it was not the most pleasant experience. We'd built a Grails monolith. We'd committed to staying up to date with Grails releases, but we'd fallen behind. And the development experience was slow and cumbersome. Upgrades were downright painful. And on top of that, our customers were starting to ask for APIs so they could start building their own integrations. We looked at our Rails app and realized we couldn't separate views from business logic. So what were we to do? Around that time, Dave Thomas's book lands on my desk. I started reading it and I got really excited about Elixir and began convincing my colleagues, hey, let's build our new APIs in Elixir. So we did. We spun up services using Cowboy, built APIs based on its REST handlers, and layered some nice little element apps on top of that. And it worked out really well. The development experience was so much better than we were used to. And to me, it felt like we got our spark and our speed back. And that experience really stuck with me. Then life happens and took me elsewhere. I left for the Lego Group to play with toy robots for a few years. And eventually, an opportunity came along to help start out a new platform at Maersk, the energy transition platform, created to support Maersk's ambition of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. And that's when Elixir came back into my life. Before we dive into the technology part of this, let me explain why the energy transition platform exists in the first place, because the why really matters to me. Maersk has set some of the most ambitious decarbonation targets in the logistics industry, going net zero across all scope by 2040. And that's not just about ships, that's about warehousing and fuel supply, ocean and air transport, land logistics, and the list just continues. And here's the thing. 2040 sounds like it's far away, but the clock is ticking, and the decision and the progress we made today will determine if we hit those targets or not. Maersk realized that this couldn't be solved by isolated systems. There was a need for a shared capability, a platform to connect data, insights, systems, and software to support Maersk's work to decarbonize. And that's where the energy transition platforms and what we exist to support. So with a bit of context in place, we can talk about the choices we made and why Elixir became part of our story. So why did Elixir enter the picture in the first place? We knew that the hardest problems we faced weren't about fancy UIs, they were about data. Getting in from multiple sources, processing it, running calculations, integrating with other systems, and doing in parallel what used to be done sequentially. That naturally gave our work sort of a back-end heavy profile. But we also needed some front-end, or crucially, no native apps, no offline support needed. And I really didn't want two completely different approaches to testing for front-end and back-end, because I was pretty sure we'd need to shift focus back and forth between back-end and front-end. And we wanted teams separated by a domain, not by a back-end front-end split. So is there a web framework that lets you do all of that without splitting your world in two? Yeah, there are a few choices, including Phoenix. And Phoenix, for those who are not familiar with it, it gives you what feels like a fast and snappy single-page application for your front end without some of the hassle other approaches can bring. And there's another reason why Phoenix became attractive. It's opinionated. It gives you a solid skeleton to build around. And that's a huge advantage when you're spinning up a new platform and a new team, and you can't hire only experienced Elixir developers. And spoiler alert, we could not. And having that structure in place meant a new team would be able to onboard faster. So it was Phoenix that got us really looking at Elixir in the first place. The framework gave us a way to think about building full stack apps without splitting our teams. But once we dug in, the decision about Elixir wasn't about novelty, it was about fit. I am not going to spend a long time trying to sell you on Elixir, given that you are at a functional programming meetup, you were probably already sold. But in short, here are the strengths we focused on when we gave our sort of initial internal introductions. And I think it gives us a bit of insight as to where our heads were at the time. First up was developer productivity. Elixir is a batteries included language. It comes with a built-in tools for testing and dependency management builds. There's one way to write tests, there's one way to manage dependencies. And that consistency makes onboarding much faster and avoids some of the fragmentation you see in other ecosystems. Second, being functional, having immutable data structures makes the code easier to reason about. You'll know all about that. And immutability helps us shift focus from how data changes over time, not just what it looks like right now, which becomes important when you end up doing a bunch of reporting and audits. Third, resilience and reliability. Elixir systems stand on the shoulders of Erlang's OTP, so 25 years of proven patterns for building fault-tolerant systems. Supervisor trees mean systems can recover quickly from failures, and that's pretty critical for a platform like ours that serves sort of multiple user groups and needs while being a monolith. And finally, concurrency. We have to fit into the Maersk enterprise architecture, and that is inherently event-driven. And Elixir almost feels like a domain-specific language built for that situation. So in short, Elixir promised to give us speed, reliability, and a great developer experience. All things we needed to be able to deliver fast. But technology isn't the only decision when you start a new platform. Development methodology will matter just as much. And we chose extreme programming early and deliberately. We wanted a highly collaborative team, the ability to react quickly to changing priorities, and we knew pair programming would help us address some of the hiring challenges and complexity we anticipated. Technology and methodologies are not separate. They will influence each other. The right technology can reinforce the strength of your chosen methodology, and vice versa, the methodology can amplify the benefits of the technology you choose. And that's what we were aiming at, a virtuous cycle where technology and methodology make each other stronger. So just what are the highlights of extreme programming? At its core, XP is about short feedback loops and high collaboration. Key practices being pair programming, test-driven development, continuous integration and delivery, and the focus on small releases to get value out early and often, and collective ownership of the code. These practices, they thrive when feedback is fast, and that's where technology plays a major role. I just come off teams at Lego that did large React app while doing TDDing and pairing, and one thing stood out to me quite clearly, and that's waiting is draining. In React, you'll often end up needing the DOM, so you pull in something like JS DOM, and then everything slows down. And that friction from making a change to getting feedback from your tests that makes TDDing and pairing painful. And here Elixir is different. The tests are fast, even when you're testing your Phoenix frontends. And that speed makes TDDing and something like ping pong pairing enjoyable, not frustrating. And I know it sounds like a small thing, but it has a huge impact for how sustainable XP practices feel day to day, and played a major role in why we ended up looking at Elixir. So we'd set our course with what we believe were the right practices and the right technology. But in a company the size of Maersk, you don't just chart your own course, you navigate shared waters. You cannot just pick a new language and hope for the best. Maersk is an organization of around 100,000 people spread across 130 countries, and our GitHub organization has something like 5,000 developers in it. At that scale, you cannot always predict what you might break for someone else, which is why feedback becomes critical, because technology choices without that kind of alignment will end up building risk. At Maersk, there is a clear process for how we go about technology choices responsibly. Before you start building, you engage with the enterprise architecture group. You sketch out the problem you intend to solve, what your architecture may look like, the technology challenges you're considering, and the non-functional requirements, things like performance, resilience, and security. And you also outline expected data volumes and what other systems you'll integrate with. Once you've got that in place, you take it to the architecture steering group for peer review. This group will bring together architects, engineers, and leaders from across the business. The goal is not to slow you down, it's to make sure you're not creating hidden dependencies or introducing risks that could ripple to other teams. It is also a chance to give others visibility into what you're solving and why you're making the choices you are. For us, the feedback we got boiled down to three big questions. Can you hire the people you need? Can you make it secure? And can you use our existing tooling and maintain your system in long term? And let's have a look at each in turn. The first question we faced was simple but daunting. Can you hire the people you need? Our target was 20 to 30 engineers. Our challenge is that Elixir is a niche language. If you were to look at the latest Stack Overflow survey, less than 3% of respondents reported having worked with Elixir in the past year. Our own market research suggested a global pool of around 20,000 engineers with Elixir or Erlang experience. Layer extreme programming on top of that, pairing TDD and collective ownership, and a Venn diagram of strong Elixir and enthusiastic about XP has a very small intersection. In practical terms, it felt like we had a handful of candidates who were both excited about Elixir and energized by pairing and TDDing. And with that comes the realization that we can't do a hire the unicorn strategy. The pool just isn't big enough. We needed a different approach. And it didn't depend on finding people who had both strengths. So we designed our hiring strategy around complementary strengths instead. We could not hire everyone with both skills. So we split into two cohorts. Cohort number one, XP coaches, people who live and breathe pairing, TDDing, small iterations, and can coach that muscle into the team. Cohort number two, Elixir experts, people who know the language, know OTP, Phoenix, and can teach those technical foundation to the rest of the team. This plays on a lesson I've had to learn repeatedly. Developers are great at learning new languages. However, pair programming is not for everyone. So rather than try and force a 2-in-1 profile, we built out the team by combining strengths and then cross-pollinating across the two cohorts through pairing and rotation. So hiring the right people means in this setup assessing for fit, not just technical skills, and that affects how we interview. The core of our interview process as we were onboarding the team was a 90-minute pairing and TDDing session. Candidates would bring their favorite language and editor, and we would bring a small problem for us to solve. And the primary goal wasn't to grill algorithms. There are no grid-like trees. There are no graph traversals. It's to see how we would work together. And we iterate through feedback loops smoothly. How do candidates respond to a failing test? Do they explain the reasoning and listen well? And do they enjoy the collaborative cadence of pairing? We wanted a candidate to experience our day-to-day reality of being an XP team and then self-select with eyes open. Is this a way of working where you will thrive? And we had some really strong candidates that did well and came back and said, listen, this isn't for me. I think that's a win. It saves us and it saves the candidates a lot of mismatches and hardship down the road. So this means we can focus on hiring the right people, but it does not solve a thin pipeline. We began by hiring across Denmark, UK, and India. This is where we already have a strong tech presence. We found some excellent people, but overall the pipeline was quite thin. Our breakthrough came when we could hire in Portugal. There's a comparatively strong Elixir community in Portugal, and I think Portugal owes that to an influx of Brazilian engineers, with Elixir originating with Jose Falim in Brazil, and it felt like striking gold. The density of candidates who were excited about Elixir went up, and our hiring pace accelerated. And this nudged us toward a critical operational choice. We had to go remote first and be as geography agnostic as we could, which brings us to what our team ended up looking like. We've landed on a distributed team across the UK, France, Portugal, India, and Copenhagen. We could not have built this team without a remote first mindset. And for niche skills in particular, local only hiring becomes a bottleneck very, very quickly. So what did we learn for this journey, and what would we repeat, and what we do differently next time? You will need patience. With a niche language like Elixir, hiring will take longer than the enterprise is used to. You need to plan for that upfront. It is normal, but you need to let the enterprise needs to know that this is our expectation. Remote first is a non-negotiable for niche skills. It opens up the pipeline and lets you hire where the community and the talent there actually is. For our two cohorts, XP versus Elixir, in hindsight, I got to relearn that it's easier to teach Elixir than it is to teach pairing as a daily practice. If we were to do this again, I would probably strengthen the initial XP cohort over the Elixir cohort. And finally, when the pipeline is thin and the pool is small, retention matters even more than it normally would. And developer happiness matters. Elixir shows up as a most loved language in the Stack Overflow surveys quite consistently. And our turnover has been astonishingly low. There are multiple factors behind this, but we know that developer happiness contributes directly towards high retention. And Elixir and Phoenix score high on the Stack Overflow questions of would you like to continue working with this technology, which would argue that both Elixir and Phoenix are quite enjoyable to work with. So overall, the principle is simple: hire for complementary strengths, and you need to build for balance. And design your process to reinforce the culture you want, not just your skills you need. So we had a team in place. The next big question was, can we make this secure? And if there's one thing we did right, it was to engage early with the cybersecurity team, even before we started bidding heavily on Elixir. Their job is incredibly tough, especially in an enterprise as large as complex and Maersk. You don't want to make it harder. So we started the conversation, the cybersecurity team, before writing a single line of production code or even settling on Elixir. Their initial feedback from cybersecurity was clear. You won't fit into our standard security tooling, and we can't provide the same training support as we normally can. And that was a bit of a reality check. The question that came back to us was, how do we solve that? All about collaboration and not about roadblocks. So for us, we knew that promises wouldn't cut it. We're a new team, a new platform. We had to show that security could be baked in from the start. So we pulled in Potion Shop, a deliberately vulnerable Phoenix app. We made very sure not to deploy it anywhere, and build a pipeline to prove that we'd be able to catch the vulnerabilities that are present in PotionShell. And we didn't stop there. We integrated our pipeline into the reporting tools cybersecurity already work with and trusts. And that was key. They can't know the details of every team. We can't expect them to know Elixir, but we need to build confidence that they know we're doing the right thing. So we focus on making their life easy. This is sort of the bare bones foundation we rely on to keep Elixir apps, our Elixir apps safe and healthy, where we couldn't rely on standard tooling. So it's mix compile, warnings, errors, git, catch any warnings at the outset and just keep errors away or warnings away. It is mix steps audit. So we scan for vulnerable dependencies. It is mix so below, which will scan Phoenix apps for the over top 10. And it's mix hex audit to flag any retired packages. Together, this forms a lightweight but effective baseline that is, of course, only part of our overall security stance. So we've proven that we had replacements in place for standard tooling where needed. But when you as a team decide to step off the paved road, you also own the security training. On mainstream stacks, though, you'll find plenty of off-the-shelf enterprise training. But as soon as you choose a less common technology, that support disappears. So we've had to build our own learning path. And we're leaning heavily on the work of the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation Security Working Group. Their resources are sort of the backbone of our security training. There is the Elixir Secured Coding Curriculum, which is designed for enterprise use. That's us. And then there's the secure coding and deployment hardening guidelines and web security best practices for the team. And all of this is required reading for our team. So what did we learn? Engage early and often with cybersecurity. They are partners, not gatekeepers. And when you choose to step off the paved road, you take on extra responsibility. Build security and you build training into your plan from day one. Elixir is exciting and security is non-negotiable. If you want to move fast without breaking trust, start with security and never stop investing in it. Security is the checkbox. It's a culture approach. And when you decide to choose a non-standard stack in an enterprise, you own that culture. So we have our team. We've made sure we can build something that's secure. The last big area of concern was around tooling and maintenance. And we got some fair questions. If hiring is hard, can you maintain your systems long term? Will your system fit into existing tooling, or will you have to rebuild everything yourself? And what about the smaller ecosystem? Are you taking on extra risk? So let's break down what we found and how we decided to address it. First, long-term maintenance. If hiring is tough and you start small and someone may decide to leave, you can't just pull in the next door .NET engineer overnight. And that is certainly true. But what we found quite quickly is that the complexity of our domain and the organizations far outweighs the complexity of learning Elixir and Phoenix. Engineers are good at picking up new technology. So we were convinced that we were not taking on any significant additional risk. Second concern was around the ecosystem size. Elixir is smaller than Java or .NET, there's no question. So we tackled that by doing our homework. We identified the critical dependencies and had a contingency plan in place. We know where our risks are, and we are ready to step in if needed. And so far, Phoenix has been solid. It's probably one of the best maintained Elixir projects around. We do have some components flagged as risks. We are still fine, but there are still things on our watch list. And then we come to the tooling questions. Will our choices fit into existing tooling? So we start out by mapping the landscape. Right, hosting and monitoring, there were easy wins. At Maersk, if you can run it in a container, you can deploy it. And for monitoring and observability, Phoenix integrates well into the existing observability stack. Builds and deployments, also easy wins. They're just GitHub pipelines. We can build those. The design system was much harder. The design system gives us a shared component library for our UI. It is optimized for JavaScript frontends, React, Vue, Angular, and so forth. And our users navigate across multiple internal systems, so consistent UI UX is important. And to get that consistency, we've just had to port components over to Live View as needed. Not free, definitely doable. This turned out to be much less of a challenge than we had feared. And I think the reason we didn't face bigger challenges at Maersk is that Maersk is not a technology monoculture. So all our tooling teams already support multiple stacks. So they're used to making technology agnostic choices. I've worked at places where everything was optimized for one stack, say Java Enterprise. And introducing Elixir there would have been a much harder sell. Not because it's impossible, but because I'm not sure I could have argued that it made financial sense to duplicate all the tooling investment already made in a company like that. Even with all that alignment in place, there were still surprises. And I think sometimes the best decision you can make is to change your mind. I was sure we would end up using Broadway. If you were to look at our initial architecture drawings, Broadway was in every single one of them. It's an amazing library, building concurrent, multi-stage data ingestion pipelines in Elixir. And given how much event-driven data we expected, that seemed like a no-brainer. But here's what happened. We didn't use Broadway. Instead, we've ended up using an internal Python-based tool for data processing. And honestly, it is fantastic. Other teams were already using it, so some of the data we needed was already flowing through it, which saves us a ton of effort. I think this is a critical lesson. Do not become target fixated. Do not pigeonhole yourself as the Elixir team. We chose Elixir because we believed it was the right tool for our core problems. But you owe the company the honesty of knowing when it isn't the right tool. Not because Elixir can't do the job, but because other solution already exists. You shouldn't be spending your effort building a pale imitation just to stay pure to your initial vision. So yes, we did choose Elixir, but we don't use it everywhere. We use it where it makes sense, and we're honest when it doesn't. That's the real story to me. It's not about a language, but it's how you innovate responsibly in a big organization. Because when the stake is high and the clock is ticking, it's not enough to move fast. You have to be able to move fast without breaking trust. And let me lead with the principles that we've extracted out of our experiences. First, engage early. When you work in an enterprise the size of Maersk, you cannot predict every dependency. And feedback is not a blocker, it's a safety net. The earlier you bring people in, the easier it is to build trust, and the easier it is to avoid any surprises. Second, own your choices. When you step off the paved road, you take on extra responsibility. That means building your own training, proving your own security posture, and making sure that your tooling story holds up. You cannot outsource that accountability. And finally, it's all about balancing speed and trust. Innovation isn't just about moving fast, it's about moving fast without breaking the enterprise. If you can deliver quickly while giving stakeholders confidence, you create a virtuous cycle. Trust will buy you freedom, and freedom will let you innovate. And that's the point I'm trying to get across here. Elixir is a tool, but the story is more about how we innovate responsibly inside a bigger organization. And with that, thank you. And I think we may have time for a few questions.
We do. Thank you very much, Erik. Loved your presentation, and I loved your slide, like why Elixir developer, productivity, reliability, and fit. It was really nice. We have 2 questions so far from the chat. Like, first question was like, I hear people say the lack of good debuggers is a deal breaker, but most don't understand the concept of using the shell is in live system. How do you convince the stakeholders?
You can do it by showing it, right? So we did have that kind of question. How can you, if you don't have a debugger, what do you do? And then you show them a production system, and you connect in, and you open up IEX in the production system. You start looking at what's actually going on, and that's a fairly strong argument we found. So not a deal breaker on our end. Do lots of demos would be my answer.
Thanks. Next question. How do you perform pair programming while working with a distributed team and so working remotely?
Yes. So we use Drupal, which is an app specifically for doing remote pair programming. There is, of course, a challenge that we've got about half the team in India, which is 3.5 to 4 hours ahead of the rest of Europe. So we do, the teams are all, we have 4 teams running, and they all have members of both in Europe and India. So we pair program with the folks in India in the morning, and then it's strictly European pair programming in the evenings. And then, crucially, make sure you do good handoff comments and notes at the end of the day, so that the team in India can pick it up in the morning. And I think that's worked out fairly well. Also, when you do XP, you try and build as small things as possible. Right? We try and do tiny increments. We push them straight to the main branch and hit production a few minutes later. So you don't have these sort of long running tasks. We try and get them into as small increments as we can, so we don't have to do any handovers that we don't need.
Thanks. Final question. What part of the language has been the most helpful to you? Like the expressiveness, the fault tolerance in OTP, the ability to hotload code, or something else?
So we don't hotload code. So not that one. I think it's the expressiveness. And I think it's not a language feature, but it's a feature of Phoenix. I think live views have served us really well. I think letting users work on systems where things just update on their own as stuff happens in the background has been a really strong selling point on us, and they get quite excited when they see that happening the first time, that they're working and someone else is working, and then suddenly numbers change on their page because someone else is working on the same thing, and that excites people. That kind of activity.
Cool. Again, thank you very much, Erik, for your presentation. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the invite.
Yes, of course.